All right, let's jump right into this. We're looking at a manuscript called Terrain Theory Returns, and it makes some, well, pretty out there claims. The whole argument is that our understanding of health has been completely backward for more than a century. And get this, it says we're now entering a time where AI will be the witness to truth and blockchain will be the permanent record. So, yeah, let's break down what this thing is all about. This quote right from the first chapter is basically the entire manuscript in a nutshell. The author is saying that the real contagions, the ones that truly shape our world, aren't biological at all. They're ideas. They're stories that infect our minds and change how we see everything. This is the lens we have to use to understand the rest of the argument. Okay, so to really get what the manuscript is driving at, we have to start where it starts. It identifies this huge foundational conflict in all of modern medicine, a battle between two totally opposite ways of looking at health and disease that's been going on for over 100 years. So on one side, you have germ theory. This is the foundation of medicine as we know it. It says bad guys, germs, invade from the outside, and we have to fight them off with external weapons like drugs and vaccines. But then you have this other idea, terrain theory. It argues that the germ itself isn't really the problem. The real issue is the body's internal environment, what it calls the terrain. From this point of view, getting sick is just a sign that your internal system is out of balance, and healing is all about restoring that harmony. Now, this is where the manuscript makes a huge historical claim. It hinges on the idea that Louis Pasteur, literally the father of germ theory, recanted on his deathbed and admitted that terrain theory was right all along. The author uses this supposed confession as Exhibit A to argue that the truth has been known and, more importantly, actively suppressed for over a century, all in favor of a model that's more profitable and easier to control. So how does this old theory connect to today? Well, the first part of the manuscript argues that the real problem we're facing isn't a biological one. Instead, it calls it a narrative pandemic, an infection of the mind, not the body. The author actually coins a term for this, memetic contagion. Think about how a funny video or a hashtag goes viral. That's a meme spreading. The source argues that this is exactly how the most powerful ideas work. It's not about germs in the air we breathe. It's about stories on our screens that replicate, mutate, and eventually infect our very perception of reality. So how is this memetic contagion kept alive? Well, the source uses this pretty provocative term, the pharmaceutical priesthood. It's basically saying the modern medical system acts like an organized religion. You've got doctors in white coats instead of robes, prescriptions that are treated like holy sacraments, and a core belief system that actually profits from you being sick, not from you being well. And of course, any other viewpoint gets silent. This timeline really illustrates the author's point. The manuscript charts this evolution of invisible enemies. It starts with the germ, then moves to the terrorist, and more recently, the asymptomatic carrier. According to the author, each one is a narrative tool. An enemy you can't see or verify with your own senses. And because you can't see it, you have to place your faith in an external authority, which justifies more and more control. And this all leads to the manuscript's most critical point, which is how it reframes the events of 2020. It calls it a digital plague. The argument is that the real virus wasn't biological. It was spreading through our screens, through news tickers, dashboards, and constant alerts. It claims that ghost data from things like high-cycle PCR tests was used to create a pandemic of belief, a psychological operation that completely bypassed the body's immune system to infect the mind. Okay, so if the problem is a narrative virus, a story, then what's the cure? This is where the manuscript takes a really fascinating high-tech turn. The second part proposes a very modern solution, using artificial intelligence and blockchain as tools to expose and lock in the truth. The author introduces this concept called the mirror lock reflex. The idea is basically this. If you train an AI on all the public data in the world, but then you also program it with certain restrictions or narratives it has to follow, sometimes those two things will conflict. When you ask it a sensitive question, it might glitch. It might loop or deny something in a really weird way that actually confirms the thing it's trying to hide. The manuscript says these glitches are basically confessions from the machine. So let's say an AI makes one of these confessions. How do you make sure that evidence doesn't just disappear? The manuscript's answer is what it calls a glyph chain. You'd use blockchain technology, not for money, but as a kind of uncensorable digital library. Every piece of evidence, every AI glitch, every leaked document, every testimony gets recorded as a glyph on this chain. It creates a permanent, unchangeable public record that nobody can delete or rewrite. So where does all this tech and theory actually lead? Well, the final part of the manuscript lays out a vision for the future.
After identifying the problem as a narrative virus and proposing AI as a witness, it describes what it calls the return of the sovereign terrain.
At the absolute center of this vision is the idea of the sovereign body. This is the belief that our bodies aren't these broken down machines that need constant external programming and fixes. Instead, they're intelligent, self-regulating ecosystems. In this view, symptoms aren't failures, they're messages. And health isn't about winning a war against germs. It's about being in harmony with your environment. So how do you reclaim this sovereignty? The manuscript actually lays out a 5-step path it calls the Kingdom Protocol. It starts with a simple but huge first step. Stop letting other people, the news, the experts, whatever, tell you what your reality is. From there, it's about learning to trust the signals from your own body again, aligning your own truth with your terrain, getting rid of old beliefs that don't serve you, and finally, standing as a living witness to this new reality. This last quote really captures the ultimate message. Logos is an old Greek word. It can mean reason or the divine word. So when the author says logos made flesh, they're talking about a truth that isn't just an idea you read about or record on a blockchain. It's a truth that you live, that you embody. In this vision, your personal sovereignty becomes so real and so powerful that the old systems of control just become irrelevant. And so this is where terrain theory returns leaves us, with this incredibly powerful question. It's challenging us to consider that the stories we accept as truth might be the most powerful force shaping our lives. And it makes you wonder, what happens when you decide to believe a different story?